Race applications, so.
Setting it up.
Very good.
Setting up.
We've got the message, be a match. Good, good.
Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome to the Transportation Policy Committee of HIPTA. At this time, Andy, I'd like to call a meeting to order.
All right, we'll start with Bullock County.
Keith
Here.
Griffey here.
Keith, Judge.
I'm here.
City of Charlestown. City of Jeffersontown. Here. City of Jeffersonville. I saw Andy Crouch. City of New Albany.
Claire's here.
City of Shively.
Shavli's here.
City of St. Matthews.
Bernie's here.
Hello, Bernie. Clark County. Floyd County. NDOT Central Office. NDOT Seymour.
Julie's here.
Hi, Julie. Jefferson County League of Cities. KYTC. You see the guy over here. Louisville Metro Government. Thanks, Wes, and thanks, Nicole. Let's see, catch anybody else? We see Mike King's online. So Mike, thank you for joining us. If I missed anybody, let me know. Anybody from Louisville Regional Airport Authority? Oldham County.
Jim Silliman here.
Hello, Jim.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. I see Mr. Glass on there too, so Bo, thank you for joining us as well. Town of Clarksville. And then Tark. Let's see Leanne's name. Hi, Leanne, if you can hear us. Also like
Yes,
to welcome.
Sorry about that.
Yes, hi, Leanne. Our advisory members, which would include KYTC District 5. Thank you for being here, Tom. And with that, we most certainly have a forum and we shall begin.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
At this time, we need action to approve the meeting minutes from the last TPC meeting in May.
Motion.
You know, motion? Second. In a second, all in favor, like sign aye. Opposed, same, thank you. Public comment period.
Elizabeth's gonna.
Elizabeth.
At this time, we did not have any public comments. Let me check the, do you see anything in the
I
chat?
do not.
Okay, no public comments.
We get some, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, if they do come through.
That-
Let me
that'd be
get this.
terrific. And the same thing with public involvement report.
Okay, so I'm doing the public, let me see.
Come.
There it is. So I'm doing Greg's public comment report form because he is on vacation. So it looks like our main transportation website had 179 unique visitors for the month of May. Our tip page had 116 unique visitors. And the MTP page had 64 unique visitors for this month. So as far as our social media analytics for May. This is really slow, sorry, there's a little bit of a lag on this. Greg did 12 posts. We had 1,776 views and 1,300 impressions or interactions with those posts on Facebook. Twitter was similar. 9 posts, only 335 impressions on Facebook and Instagram, 11 posts and 933 impressions with 40 interactions for the month of May. So Facebook and Instagram holding strong there together. The only event that Greg attended for transportation for the month of May was the Alberta O. Jones Park Day. And as you can see, couple of the public comments that he walked away with was free bus service, more Lime scooters or able ways to travel, and more bike lanes toward Dixie. So that's a great event to attend, and we get out there, and one of the things you can see in the top right corner, it was kind of an interactive activity that we asked participants if they had $100, what would they put that $100 towards transportation activities within the region? And Andy, I'm not, one of them, it was transport, it was,
So we got, I think their maintenance, it's safety, it's capacity improvements and bike ped. So if you have if you have scarce funds, which we have scarce funds, I think some of that message kind of gets somewhat lost in the message, right? If you only had so much and you're responsible for the budget, what are you putting it toward? We used it at the certification review. We had a couple of people that played our game that night too. Same game that night.
yeah, so it's extremely interactive. People love it, and it's really interesting to see the feedback that we get from that. So that concludes Greg's report for May activities.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth. Andy, at this time, session recap for Kentucky Better Transportation.
Yes, today we have a guest speaker, and I think it's a guest speaker that's going to be familiar to a lot of the folks in the room and online. That is Miss Jennifer Kirshner from Kentuckians for Better Transportation. Jennifer is going to be joining us online today, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit about what KBT's got going on, and maybe a little bit what happened in this past session in Frankfurt. So, Jennifer, feel free to share your screen. You got something to share, and we've got you live on the microphone.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. This is a group of rock stars here. So let me just see if I can. I wanted to put it in presenter view and share.
Is it giving you the option to share?
No, I'm not seeing it actually.
Do you want to make her host?
No, she should be able to share.
Oh, I got it. I got it. It still won't let me though. I see the button. There we go. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that.
There we go.
It's never straightforward, is it? Okay, there we go. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just I know we have our friends in Indiana who I could probably learn something from, but you're going to hear a little bit about Kentucky today. I'm actually an IU Bloomington grad, so I care a lot about and keep tabs on what is happening in Indiana. So really our main goal is to educate and advocate, but primarily that applies to multimodal infrastructure. So really what we're doing is we're heading to the General Assembly and we are lobbying for investment. I think the other important word there on the screen is sustainable. And recurring mechanisms, user fees, predictability for capital investments and long-term plan. These past two budget sessions, as we'll talk a little bit about, we saw one-time investments, a lot of infrastructure one-time investments, which we're grateful for and we appreciate. But the goal of the General Assembly is not to have a surplus. So having our strategy be large omnibus funding bills for one-time investments is a slippery slope, for lack of a better comparison. So we're really focused. We feel change needs to come from a systemic point of view for long-term planning, not just these one-time investments. So what I thought we would do is there's really three bills that a lot of bills we watched, a lot of fires we had to put out. I think I spent more time like trying to kill bills than actually supporting them, which was a little different for this session. I think that the best way to go about this is I thought I would talk about House Bill 501, and then we could do 502 with the two House joint resolutions, which talk a little bit about the road plan, and then finish with the House Bill 900, which was the one-time investments. So, the Transportation Cabinet budget it's pretty similar to 2024, except we see larger amounts for the county city programs, the bridge improvement programs. I think the General Assembly really heard the concerns from judges and mayors, and they have taken it seriously that our secondary roads, our more rural routes have been neglected. Not to point out anything negative, because this is very positive, but this is not new money. This is money from the road fund. So we have not created more revenue. We're essentially playing a shell game of how we're allocating it. So in my mind, we would have liked to have seen new revenue go to that, and still keep the road fund at the state level whole. So we'll continue to work on those user long-term fee mechanisms, but great to see that. And I don't know, many of you may have already met with Bobby Joe Lewis from Rural Secondary. I know they're working on getting that money out the door pretty quickly. The one thing that is different that, listening to your conversation earlier, one of my personal opinions is this $24 million that we see in 501, that is a grant matching program for cities and counties. I think it's actually a really great use for bike and ped and sidewalks. There's a lot of all different opinions about if the road fund should be used for sidewalks and trails or just pavement and asphalt on highways and main roads. But I think this offers a nice opportunity to put some of those smaller projects, that you wouldn't put in the road fund, that you wouldn't try to compete with road fund dollars for, but still are mobility and transportation issues. And one of the things we're always looking out for with the transportation budget is that we don't like to see diversions from the road fund. Over the years, there's been diversions for state police, many different things. This year, we saw $37 million come out of the road fund to go for driver's licensing locations and support and that whole effort. So we don't like to see money not going towards what it's supposed to be used for, as specified in the state constitution. So we continue to pound on that. We don't like to see dollars used for anything other than the roads. There were some interesting language changes. Again, we were more ancillary to these. We're very involved in the conversations, but since they aren't directly related to funding, we take a secondary role. But a lot of our members are interested in recycled asphalt products. So making progress with the cabinet on some of that stuff. The I-69 bridge has been a very important project, and we're seeing continued support for that. So that's great. Equitable distributions for lettings. We like to see work in a consistent program go out across the state, not necessarily in just one area. And then design build. So there was a large push this session for getting projects out the door. The General Assembly wants things fast, fast, fast. And times there's a disconnect, I think, between the reality of the wheels of government and how they grind and how quickly we want things done. So there was a lot of conversation about how does the cabinet get work out the door. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to a money issue. They have a cash budget that they do, and road fund is looking pretty anemic these days, especially after the gas suspension tax that we've seen with the governor and in some counties and cities still. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. One thing that does end up in the transportation budget every year has been the KRI, which is actually a Riverport funding program. In years past, this $500,000 was just a general fund allocation to be used within a year, and it was for all 10 Riverports. So you've probably heard me say before, that's woefully inadequate funding for Riverport infrastructure. You can't really do anything in a Riverport for the whole 500,000. So we still like to see that in there, but what we did this year that I think was really exciting, and it seems small, but again, speaks to that sustainable funding. There was a Riverport Trust Fund in statute that was not being used. So we asked for these funds to be put in that trust fund. And what it does is it changes, instead of a 50-50 match, it becomes an 80-20. And then it also has carryover authority. So we can start to accumulate money, ideally, that would leverage federal grant funds, for example. So small pot of money with a long-term vision for sustainable funding. So a little bit about what we talked about, what was our messaging this session. In 2024, we saw an extra $450 million for high growth communities. I think that was very exciting. Mixed reports on how much work has gotten out the door, but there's still a lot to be done there. And again, we saw those city and county program bridges. So we wanted to see more of that, of course. But we also were reminding them of the reality of the situation. I know I don't have to tell you guys, and it says gas tax dollars is 2015, and that's when we addressed the floor. But quite frankly, we've been losing the buying power of the gas tax dollar for decades. Started with the CAFE standards in the 1970s, and with the more fuel economy we have, the less gas revenue we have, but the wear and tear on the roads remains the same. So we tried to keep that simple and to the point. I think everybody knows that and doesn't disagree, but what do you do about it would be the question. We also pushed pretty hard unsuccessfully on changing EV fees. We kind of thought this was a bit of a low-hanging fruit, but it's turned out to be a challenge. We are the lowest EV fees in all the surrounding states. So we wanted to see those increase some. One of the other things that's a real, I think, a liability or unfortunate outcome for Kentucky is that in 2024, we suspended any registration fees or additional fees on hybrids, which is the fastest growing, the largest section of electric vehicles. So we do have $120 annual fee for EVs. And then on your big chargers that you see on interstate, so not any that you'll see around town or smaller ones, there is a 3-cent kilowatt hour charge. So there's some revenue. I've heard estimates of about $11 million coming in so far, but the argument would be, let's get this worked out now before full adoption, and however many years that ends up being. So for 2026, again, we wanted to continue to keep the general fund and transfer. The thing that we pushed most hard on, even more than EVs, and failed to do, is we think that indexing the gas tax to the average wholesale price of gasoline is misguided. So we've seen inflation. I do not even have to talk about that. We're all well acquainted with it in every avenue of our lives. So we made the case that we think that the gas tax should be used for something that it's actually going to purchase. So we suggested the National Construction Highway Index. We thought it was getting traction. We were feeling pretty good about that. And then the war with Iran happened, and gas prices is not really something anybody wants to talk about. So that really tanked our plans. There is still very much an appetite to at least do this. Again, this will not generate new revenue. This just stops some bleeding. So it's a part of the whole, but certainly doesn't fix everything. So we talked about some diversions, and we continue to talk about long-term funding. One of the things that we've already started talking about is what does 2028 look like with a new governor, new administration. We would like to present to the new administration a menu, if you will, of road funding options. I know y'all are very familiar with the word tolling. I don't know if this falls on good ears or not, but we think that tolling needs to be considered everywhere in the state as a portfolio of funding options. We've proved we don't like to touch the gas tax at a regular basis for a lot of reasons. So something's got to give. We can't keep building roads and expecting them to be safe and efficient and not fund them. Road user charges at the federal level doesn't seem to be gaining a whole lot of attraction. Tolling really does. I think we're calling them choice lanes now in Tennessee. You don't have to take them, but if you want to pay extra to go faster, you can. So we're at the federal level, we're very engaged in those conversations because some of that education has to come back to Kentucky. So 502, and I won't go into this, this is the hundreds and hundreds of pages, thousands of pages of the road fund. So with 502 and then the two House Joint Resolutions, we have the 6-year road plan. One of the things that I touched on a little bit, but that I would emphasize here is that the priority of the General Assembly was to stop over programming. So a lot of times they will have a road fund, and this probably sounds familiar. Yay, I have my project in the road fund and in the 6-year road plan, and it's in there for 10 or 12 or more years, right? So it's really become a planning document or a roadmap or a suggestion as opposed to these are the funded projects and this is what we could count on. And a lot of that is because of the overprogramming. Everybody wants a project in their district. Yay, we got it in the road plan, but we've created a plan that's grossly out of whack with the money that we actually have. So when it comes to planning and actually, sound implementation of transportation plans, this is obviously a real issue. So, I like to point out that it's not a funding bill. It's a plan. It's a map. So keeping our legislators, accountable. Huge kudos to Representative Upchurch and Senator Higdon on this. They were co-chairs of the transportation. They gutted a lot of the road fund. I don't know if many of you noticed, maybe you saw less or didn't get the projects you wanted. While that's sad, ultimately, I think it helps the argument in the long run. People need to feel the gravity of the situation at the state level to really act on it. So lastly, I'll finish up with House Bill 900, and then I'd love to, if we have time, just a little bit to hear about how your session went or what your transportation update would be for me. Really, in terms of all nodes, you've got them all there in around the Louisville area. So successfully, we were in 2024, we got $15 million for Riverports over 2 years. The Riverports did an outstanding job of getting that money out the door to allocate it. It's under contract. General Assembly was really happy. So we went back and said, well, the next phase of our plan includes modernization and X, Y, and Z, and here's why we need 30 million. And lo and behold, they did it. So that was a really positive outcome there. Rail, we saw there were 2 programs, the Kyazi and the K-Slip. In 2024, the Kyazi program was stopped, mostly just because it went to it had 6-8 different calls. It just the money took a while to get out the door. There was some bureaucratic issues with the Department of Revenue. So we stopped that one, but we advocated for the K-Slip, which is for short line asset preservation. Still can apply to spurs, redevelopment, those kinds of things. Aviation did fairly well. One of the interesting things we saw in aviation this year that we have not is that our commercial airports saw $55 million across, I should say that's Lexington, CVG, and Louisville. Capital projects, improvements, and most importantly, flight incentives. I'm sure many of you are aware of, while airports look like they're resource rich, they're actually really cash poor for investment. It's very regulated how the money is spent. So when it comes to attracting more flight routes, more direct flights, point A to point B, no layovers. A lot of times airlines require incentives for the first few years till the route is established. Like it or hate it, it's kind of just how it works. And Kentucky has never been able to compete with that before. So this is the first time we've seen the General Assembly allocate money to flight incentives, which you can hate them or not. There's a big conversation to have there too, but it's certainly going to help the 3 commercial attract new flights. And then we saw, much like we saw the 450 in House Bill 1 in 2024, we saw 230 million happen in House Bill 900 for roads and bridges. So less, but still a good amount. I think the big concern now is, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar when Governor Beshear suspended the increase of the gas tax, which is July 1, and then also a 10-cent abatement, a 10-cent discount, I'll say. So what that's done is it's actually just in real time put a halt to the money that the gas tax is generating, that the cabinet uses to put out their projects. And they're not going to really put out projects unless they understand how they're going to be funded. So when the cabinet is cash poor and restricted, it definitely halts work coming out of the projects. It halts new projects being started. So we really want to emphasize the importance to not touch the gas tax and to let that flow so the cabinet can do what they need to do. So that's been a bit of a political issue for us that we've pushed back on. On an individual level, it's a few dollars a month, if that. But when we aggregate all of those costs, At a state level, we're talking well over $30 million, $28 million a month. So it becomes real money. So that's actually taken up a lot of time in the past couple months. It's just really hitting the streets and making sure everybody knows, don't touch this. This is important. We got great support from our judges and our mayors on that as well. So some of these are just gas tax slides, which probably you've heard me talk enough about. So I will leave it there. I'd be happy to take questions. I know I probably went through that kind of fast. It was throwing a lot at you. But Andy, I'll turn it over to you and see what happens next.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and really do appreciate the commentary on the over programming of the 6-year plan. I think that is the real deal. That is a expectation setting document, and when expectations aren't met, nobody wins. And so let's give that.
That's right.
And then
Right.
also gas tax commentary as well. That's the real deal too. I mean, we cut the legs out from it, and everything's going to slow down. One thing I want to do in front of this committee is to plug Jennifer's or KBT's conference. It happens every winter. I assume we're having it
January.
January. We're going to be in the Golf House again this year.
Yes, we will be.
I would strongly encourage TPC members and others to attend that conference. It's a couple of days worth of this type of conversation and important conversations across multi modes and across about funding and about all the things. So it's a really good short conference. It's local for those of us in town, and she gets some good speakers from Washington and elsewhere on there. And so I would definitely encourage you all to join.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Andy.
Any questions in the room, I guess?
All right. Well, hearing none. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to working with you, Andy. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Jennifer. Likewise. Thanks again.
Thank you. Moving the Kentucky Enter Forward 2050 project evaluation rubric. Chris, come on up here. Is it like rubric cubes or just rubric?
It's
It's okay.
So, most of you are aware by now that we're updating our long range plan for around late spring of 2027. We've got proposed updates to the project scoring rubric. The link was included in everyone's packet, so hopefully the review who wanted were able to kind of see that. You take a little time with it. We presented our updates, Darian presented the updates at the TTCC earlier this month. And these updates are made in alignment with the approved goals and objectives, which were updated back last winter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to review some of the changes by scrolling through the tabs in the rubric with Elizabeth's help here and indicate what's changed from last time, because we used what we used last time as kind of our starting point, and then we made changes accordingly based on things that we thought needed to be updated. So starting with the common criteria tab, we removed the local priority for all transportation projects. And we did this for a number of reasons. The MTP score is intended to directly affect how a project meets the goals and objectives of the MTP, is one of the reasons. So local priority inclusion completes the meaningful outcome of the data point. And we're still going to collect and use the local priority ratings that you all will be asked to give, but it'll be separately used in the decision-making process for MPO dedicated and the MPO dedicated call for projects and in the shift sponsoring and boosting selections. And also separating the local priority makes sense because we're still going to have new projects coming in during the 4 years after the initial MTP is adopted. And it kind of was awkward to try to figure out how to score those projects when all the other projects previously included the local priority in the score. So this way, we're just gonna use local priorities separately than the full MTP score. So also, On the same tab, we changed the environmental justice due to Executive Order 14151. Instead of incorporating our EJ areas into our planning process and scoring, we're going to apply transportation environmental impact areas, the TEIAs, that we've talked about a few times in the past. So the move from EJ areas, which included economic effects on low income and minority populations, to the TEIAs is designed to include areas with higher elderly persons, people with disabilities, households without cars, and poverty percentages. The TEAI guide was approved back in November of last year. And finally, these 20 points in this section were dispersed. Accordingly, we put 10 points to the environmental impact, 5 points to the planning studies, and 5 points to the TEIAs. The 20 points from the local priority, that
Yeah,
is.
remember the local priority thing, that's when you all say, if you send us 20 projects, basically pick your favorites.
Yes.
So that, again, like Chris said, we'll still get the information, but that may or may not be the best way to score our projects on terms of the goals objective.
Right. Okay, so next we'll go to the roadway criteria tab. If you can, Elizabeth. Okay. So on this one, the changes are that we removed the ADT to just use roadway functional classification. This we felt was better because it considers the purpose and context of the roads rather than just the vehicle count. And it's also more applicable to long-term planning, funding, and design where ADT is just a snapshot. Also, we updated the improves active transportation criteria. We adjusted the point values to match the order of the point values for our network connectivity criteria for bike ped. The multi-use trail is the highest value option, and now sidewalks is the second. For vehicular safety, we switched from using the top crash rate per 100 million vehicle miles, HMVM, to regional and local high injury network, and we raised the point values. We gave the ones along the regional high injury network, you would get 25 points, and if it's along the local high injury network, it would be 20 points.
And those are the ones that were established just recently with our safe streets and roads for all, actually saying.
So this ensures projects along those segments and intersections with the highest fatality and crash rates will receive the most points. Additionally, we lowered the point values for the improvements to safety component in order to be able to increase the high injury network vehicular safety component. And finally, the pedestrian bicycle safety, we changed the range of years from 10 down to 5 to align with the Safe Streets for All data. Additionally, this lowered the number of crashes from 5 to more than 2 crashes in that section. And the next for the transit criteria tab. So do the next one over. We removed the vehicle replacement project type from the criteria. The reason is because the scores are generated by location. We use Survey 123, which is a Esri ArcGIS product, and so projects without a location need to be assessed differently to avoid generating an artificially low score. This is true with any project without a location, so that would include projects that are like a program or, just not located on a road. We added the ADA requirements as criteria. Americans with Disabilities Act states that public transit must be fully accessible to individuals with disabilities. And that brings us to the last tab, the bicycle and pedestrian criteria. So here we have the network connectivity. We raised the point values for multi-use trail path to 30 points, and we increased all of the other categories there. The safety, we lowered the range of years from 10 down to 5 and lowered the number of crashes to greater than 2. These are the same changes we made to the bike ped safety criteria in roadway. And then also we lowered the points from improvements to safety and added them to the network connectivity. So, other updates, the data layers we made sure that we are using the most recent data on employment, high density, land use clusters, and high freight corridors. And, so what we're requesting today, we're requesting approval for use of this rubric moving forward, starting after it's approved. The exception would be for the MPO dedicated call for projects coming up this fall. Everything else we would switch to the new rubric as soon as we have approval. And that's all I got.
Well, thank
Any questions?
you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? I'll entertain a motion to approve Chris's report and use this rubric moving forward. Got a motion?
I'll make that motion or second one if there's already one.
All in favor, like sign aye.
Aye.
Both same.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Brady, Project Management Guidebook.
Hopefully, you've all had an opportunity to review the finalized version of the project management guidebook. Should be a copy in your packet. There's also a QR code. And link. There we go. Very good. We're live.
There you
All right. If you haven't had a chance yet, QR code, there's one. Once again, these are in your packet as well as I think the actual physical copy of what we have in the guidebook. Just a second there. We want to go with that. All right, last month I brought to you the core policy adjustments that were included within this finalized version of guidebook that were approved by TCC and TPC. The changes that are in this finalized version is basically taking those core policy changes and then implementing them within the narrative of how the structure of the guidebook works. Should be exactly the same as what I talked to you about in more detail last month. Other adjustments include adding additional language, expounding upon some of the details of the process regarding how our project tracking sheet works, how that's updated on a monthly basis, how our biannual project reevaluation meeting will work, the first of which will be the end of July, early August, by the way. And the project review meetings will work with individual project sponsors. There are some additional charts and tables that are just there to help and provide additional clarity and understanding of the policies within the guidebook. And potential timelines for understanding when some of these processes typically will occur. Did anyone have any questions or would like to go over any specific aspects? I'm happy to talk about that or answer any questions that I can. Otherwise, I would like to request action to approve the project management guidebook.
Point everybody's attention to the kind of the one pager thing here that you talk about charts and tables. Hopefully that can be a good resource. You know, we built that, it's saying, hey, I hope some of our local governments will print that page out, and stick it on their office wall or something like that. Hey, this, then this, then this, kind of the new sequence. Hopefully that's a good resource to grow from here.
Which page is that?
That is on page. Shoot, it is in,
Not.
I hear 9, right after. It is, looking at the table of contents, flying.
I'm seeing page 9.
Page 9 it says,
Leave it as-
page 9, yeah, I'm not gonna pay attention, yep.
That chart is specifically for the Kentucky process, which is a little more. A little more complicated. In some ways than the Indiana site for a process, which isn't changing substantially based on how we got it in the past.
That's right, this is, remember, our guidebook has always, it always has had 2 parallel paths.
Right.
2 different lengths of paths. The Kentucky path is often longer and windier, as maybe is evidence on that diagram. But nonetheless, these are the changes, and like Ray said, the guts of it was what, we discussed last month.
Good deal. That's great. Okay, so I'll make sure that gets on the wall at our place, that's for sure. I'll entertain a motion to approve, Brady's report on the new project.
So moved.
At a second,
Second, so Bernie was, yeah.
thank you. All in favor, like sign aye. Those opposed, same. Thank you all. Brady, you're up again. Call for projects, the announcement.
So. With that approval, we now have processes to implement for a golf projects and maintenance of our projects as we move along. Slightly different pattern, mostly familiar with a few cabinets. So this is a preliminary announcement of what our plans are for our 2026 golf projects. This fall will be for both states, for Indiana and Kentucky. A couple of, something that's gonna be important to consider for this golf projects is how we plan for the new reauthorization bill that is forthcoming in the coming months. We don't know the exact details of what it's gonna look like. There's gonna be a lot that changes between now and whenever that's finalized. We don't know if the current IIJA will be extended for a certain amount of time, 6 months or a year or more or less. So there's some unknowns in this process, but what the Build America 250 Act, which is kind of a preliminary bill from the House that's not finalized, but gives us an idea of where the next reauthorization might go, points to are a couple things that affect our Connecticut program. It's been, I think we mentioned last month as well. And that is, as far as suballocated programs, the CRP program is likely, not for sure, but likely to be repealed for future years. So in other words, any year beyond fiscal year 26 or potentially beyond fiscal year 27, we are not expecting to receive suballocated CRP funds. Additionally, we're not expecting for Indiana, we're not expecting to receive suballocated protect funds as well. There still will be at least as it's currently written, there will be a non-suballocated opportunity for protect funds, or perhaps they'll be folded into a different funding category. There's some fuzziness on there, but we are not expecting suballocated funds. Another keynote for our Kentucky side is we have CRP funds. If we look at our FEMA's report of how much funding is available in that program, we have $9 to $10 million, and we are anticipating to receive hopefully some money in fiscal 27 for this project as well. It's not anticipated that those funds that we have received in current or previous year will be rescinded, so those will still be available. But we are not anticipating beyond fiscal 27 at a maximum any additional funds. We are also expecting some of these other programs to receive a percentage increase in their suballocations. So we're expecting additional yearly STBG funds, additional TA funds, additional HSIP and additional CMAQ funds. What those percentages actually are and how that affects us and how that gets suballocated directly to KIPTA's coffers. Once again, there's some fuzziness, we're not sure. But for a conservative standpoint, we can't responsibly program CRP funds beyond fiscal year 27. So that's going to affect how we do this golf projects. Sponsor eligibility. all state and local public agencies in our NPA are eligible to receive MPO dedicated funds. But the project must be located within an MPA boundary. To be
Which is the big black boundary
Yes.
covering all 5 counties.
the big part, right? All right, look at Indiana's in terms of anticipated funding availability. This shows the amount of unprogrammed funds we have right now for each fiscal year. Fiscal year 27, this upcoming fiscal year, we have about $84,000 still available. That amount of money will need to be programmed shortly within the next couple of months here. We're gonna have a quarterly meeting in July with our Indiana sponsors to provide some recommendations to bring to the TPC potentially in August or September to finalize our fiscal year 27 funding. We don't have time to wait for the call projects for that funding. So that first year will be handled outside of the call projects process, but all these later years, there is $49,000 currently still available in 28, projected 849,000 in 29. That's one of our biggest year that we currently have programmed. If we have other funds programmed in 29, but there's still a decent chunk remaining that could be put toward other projects. A little bit in 2030, and then in 2031 and 2032, that's an anticipated full year of sub-allocated funding. That can go to costs for projects that are existing MPO dedicated Indiana projects or new projects that are proposed and accepted by the TPC through this call projects process.
Brady, correct me if I'm wrong, but those last 2 years are at the current rates that we get from via NDOT. It's not assuming any inflation on maybe more STBG or more TAP or HSIP.
That's correct. So, like I said, we're a little fuzzy on what exactly it's gonna look like. So the conservative approach is several years from now, based on yearly increases and just the typical increases we would be expecting from those programs. We hope that we're gonna have more than what we have today in 2031, 2032. We don't know yet. And so that's a conservative estimate. That's the estimate that the current estimate for fiscal year 27 is what's shown for fiscal years 31 and 30. In terms of prioritization for which funding categories for Indiana need the most amount of money, Indiana has us, we have currently our 6 funding sources, and they would like us to be obligating and programming at least 50% of our sub-allocated amount over a certain period of time. It would use about 10 years to show this, that we are spending money in each of our funding categories, because Indiana commingles our 6 funding categories. So we could, like this past fiscal year, we spent $6 million or so on the Bridge 51 construction phase. That's all STBG funding, even though we didn't receive $6 million of STBG funding in that year. Over the space of 10 years, we can show that we're spreading the love and how we're programming our projects over the course of what we have available. All right, this is a chart that's too small to read, but here for reference for you. That represents what I was just talking about with our 6 funding sources in Indiana. Protect and CRP are likely going to go away. We notice we have a fiscal year, it's a fiscal year 30, I believe. CRP phase for an existing project. We're going to have to consider what to do with that, assuming the CRP does go away. That project very likely could fall within a CBAC eligibility. We would have to potentially do that, or potentially the other phases of this project are funded with TA funds. So we may try to put the construction of that project into the TA with the rest of its phases as well. But that's a consideration for this call projects for Indiana, is what to do with that particular construction phase. And then the main categories that we have funding available to, that we need to program more money into to at least hit that minimum 50% threshold, and there's room to grow, and what our maximum amount is over a 10-year period, is our CMAQ funds, TA funds, and STBG funds. For HSIP funds, we've already all over the course of the last 10 years and looking forward, programmed as much money as we have available. So we don't really have any more HSIP money to program at this time. So if you're an Indiana sponsor looking for additional funds, focus on CMAQ, SPBG and TA eligible projects. In Kentucky, we are looking to have an additional 2 full years of programming plus whatever we have currently unobligated. That amounts to over $54 million of SPBG funds and over $10 million of TA funds. That's the estimate as of right now. This changes as we go fiscal year to fiscal year a little bit. This is an estimate where we're at. This fall projects in Kentucky, we're only going to be looking for cost increases to existing projects. Won't be accepting new projects at this time. The reason for that is we need to, for our project management guidebook update rules, we need to get every Kentucky project on the same page with an updated cost estimate and timeline so that we can set the stage for their monitoring their success throughout the rest of the project life cycle. So this cycle for Kentucky is going to be focused on getting everyone as right as we can be in terms of estimates, no matter what stage of the project you're at, going forward and focusing our funding availability on those projects. And then we'll come back and I'll have this exact same type of presentation in May next year. We're gonna be on a yearly cycle. And hopefully, if we have covered everything that we need to cover in this call to projects for existing projects, there'll be opportunities for new projects to request funds in the next cycle. General schedule of the outline. KIPTA is going to be working with a third-party consultant, hopefully, to develop these cost estimate and timelines in conjunction with project sponsors. Those are general outline. I would expect for a project sponsor to be putting together cost estimates in September and October, and be working with KIPTA and our consultant on that process. There'll be more details to come on that in the coming months as we iron out the details ourselves in the best way that this is going to work for everyone involved to make this as smooth of a process as we can. But look for September, October, maybe even into November for some of that coordination for cost estimates. Once everyone has a signed, agreed to estimate for the costs and timeline, then we'll be able to have a bulk projects application period. Now that you know what you're going to be applying for. Once we receive all our applications, we'll go through the process. We'll have a TTCC working group, probably held in January after a public comment period and analysis and all the bits that go part with the bulk projects process, and aiming for a February TBC approval for this cycle of bulk projects. In subsequent years, we will be starting this process in May and ending it in November. And hopefully that'll be more of a static schedule that everyone will be able to align on going forward. That's all I have for now. If there's any questions, I haven't heard them, and there'll be more information about this in coming months as well.
Any questions for Brady? Brady, that was very informational. Thank you so much. Chris? Social economic forecast, the wrap up.
Well, wrap up of what we call phase 2.
Right.
We still have work to
Okay.
do. Okay, I just have this one slide here. Okay, it's our little project roadmap. So like I said, we wrapped up phase 2. As of yesterday, we wrapped up our 5 countywide meetings. And we held a virtual training back on June 3rd. After that training, we distributed the materials to our planning partners who were participating and given them a little bit of time to review what KIPTA staff had put together. Oldham County kicked off the work meetings back on June 15th, and we finished in New Albany, Floyd County yesterday. There were 2 meetings in downtown Jefferson County, or downtown Louisville for Jefferson County. And we do have some remaining block groups to assess. We are not planning another meeting for Jefferson County. Metro staff is reviewing some permits and other information, and they'll be corresponding with us so that we can wrap that up. overall, the participation was great in all 5 counties, and we want to say thanks to everyone who participated. I think that at least a few on the call right now helped us out. And I do want to reiterate that we want these forecast figures to be the region's numbers and not just KIPTA's numbers. And as we move on to phase 3, the data wrap-up phase, KIPTA staff is going to be making any final adjustments and also preparing the finalized maps, which we'll present to the group probably later in the fall when we have that all complete. Additionally, Aaron Manselli and Randy are going to be completing the calibration of the traffic demand model and transitioning the block groups data that we worked with and applying that to the TAs. And eventually we'll get to our final phase, phase 4, and that's going to be using the socioeconomic forecast data with the MTP update coming later in the next spring. And that's all I have on that. I can take any questions or if there anyone else wants to add anything.
Well, Chris already said it, but thank you all, or thanks to your staffs for meeting with us. It's always challenge, but it's always, I think it's engaging in terms of we get people thinking and thinking about where the, that hopefully we broke it down in the right levels, at the right ways this time. Seems like we did. We had a good conversation in each of the 5 counties. So thank you all once again.
Thank you, Chris. And you're up again,
Yes.
administrative modifications.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about administrative modifications 13 and 14. We have 2 to cover today. Oh, okay. And these updates were submitted for the fiscal year 25 to 28. TPC approval is not required. You've got admin mod 13 in the packet, and that was submitted to KYTC and NDOT for the STIP updates back on June 18th. And then basically a couple days later, I went ahead, I had to do administrative modification 14. That one is not in the packet, but I did email you all on the 23rd. And also we've already gone ahead and submitted it to NDOT for the STIP. There's no Kentucky changes in that one. So qualifying criteria. Clippers. Feels like it's going slow today. For stuff.
Can you make it's not doing it.
Huh. Sorry, folks. Hoping I've hit the button a couple of times. I don't I'm too fast.
You may have to just go. There we go.
Okay,
Most of go.
Well, me doing it,
Okay.
yeah. Just tell me what you want.
okay.
Did you get to it?
Go back and put them. There we are. Okay, so qualifying criteria, most of y'all are familiar with this anyways, though. Administrative modifications are for the minor updates. These updates in these 2 we're covering today include phase shifts, TIP funding updates, combining a project, and adding some new group projects. We talk about these first 2 on their own. These are the only 2 that are in both of the administrative modifications. They're the only ones in administrative modification 14. We typically put together only 1 per month. However, for reasons mostly out of our control, we needed to update the fiscal year that would be shown quickly so that we could get these 2 project updates into NDOT so they could put it in their amendment. And Andy or Brady can correct me if I'm saying this wrong. The funding, I think, has a deadline in September, but
Correct.
At first we had them as fiscal year 26, but we were told we needed to have it at 27.
That's, yes, since NDOT has closed the book, so to speak, yeah, so it needs to be, it's gonna be 27.
Yeah.
It's the extra money that we programmed at our, what was that, Brady, was that at our last quarterly Indiana meetings.
Approved last month here.
Yeah, improved last month, thank you.
Yeah, Kentucky is 3364 and 1558. Is the projects we're talking about, but yeah, and we wanted to make sure, or at least hopefully make sure that they clear the NDOT amendment in time. And next, okay, so most of these NDOT projects were simply just funding and open to public updates, 2971, 3485, 3246, and 2967. The last two I wanna highlight though, so these two, we combined the projects, they already have the same DES number. We updated the name and description because it was a little bit confusing as we had them. There was reference to kind of a greater project concept. Talking about 6.25 mile stretch, but this is just one intersection at Charlestown Pike and Logistics Ave. So we updated that so that it was more clear. And then also, I want to note that the first project on that list, KIPT ID 2971, the SR 60 bridge deck overlay, that one has moved out to the illustrated years. So that's why I have it asterisk there. Then I have 6 more new NDOT projects, 5 of which are illustrated to the current tip. So for those who maybe don't realize that NDOT STIP is on a different cycle than the KIPTA tip, so we might start to see more of these happening and until we update our tip, just because NDOT needs to have them in the STIP, but it's outside of our tip years. So these are all maintenance projects, so they're all group projects. Finally, I have 2 Kentucky projects, both KYTC projects. We made funding updates to KIPT ID 3125, which is the I-64 bridges at Tucker Station Road, and also 3042 called Kentucky 2055. This one is a sidewalk project along Holly Road, and I don't have any action to request.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yes, just a couple announcements. First, I want to recognize Tracy Lovell, KYPC. Joined us right after we did the roll call. So Tracy, thank you for being here. Second, I want to Brady spoke about it a little bit, but KIPTA will be releasing an RFQ pretty soon for that third-party consultant that is going to help us get our project schedules and our costs right. That's going to help be the critical information to get this new process that was, I guess you could say, officially approved today. So for those that are listening online or watching us on YouTube, that's something that KIPTA will be putting out probably in the next week or 2. So be on the lookout for that for the engineering planning firms that might be out there listening. And then last but not least, I want to point out that next month in July, we should expect to not have a TPC meeting. And so we will come back for our next meeting on August 27th. So the regular scheduled meeting on August 27th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. And since we're good followers of state law here, that meeting, for those that didn't know, is at 11:30 Central Time. We have to announce both of our times. So 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central, August 27th. We'll see you then. We'll talk to you before then. Let us know if you got any questions, comments, concerns. We're always here for you.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other business? Any other comments? Well, hearing none, make a motion to dismiss.
So
You have a second, all in favor, aye. Those opposed,